A lot of retirement advice starts with one big number. Save $1 million, save $2 million, save more just to be safe. But that's not really how retirement works in real life. What matters is how much income your savings can create after tax, once OAS, CPP, and the type of accounts you have all come into the picture. Because two people can retire with the same amount saved and end up with very different results. So the real question isn't just, do I have enough? Is what kind of income can this actually give me? In this video, I'll help you build your real retirement number from the ground up using one simple retirement gap card. What you want to spend after tax, what income will show up from CPP and OAS, and what taxes due to the withdrawals that fill the gap. I'll also show you how to pressure test your assumptions and which levers matter most if you're behind. Whether you're 5 years from retirement or already drawing CPP, this gives you a target you can update every year instead of a random number you hope is right. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Jacqueline Ozdemir, a financial advisor with the Ferguson Financial Planning Team. A big part of my work is helping Canadian families turn, I think we're probably okay, into an actual retirement plan that accounts for taxes, benefits, and real life spending. And one of the most common mistakes I see is people doing the math backwards. They pick a big lump sum first, then hope the lifestyle works. You do not need perfection here. You just need a more useful way to do the math. For today, I'm assuming you'll have a mix of accounts and income sources because that's where this gets real for most people. The answer usually comes down to three things: what you want to spend after tax, when CPP and OAS begin, and how taxable your withdrawals will be. Once you can see those three pieces clearly, your retirement number gets a whole lot less fuzzy. If this is helpful, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe. Then let's start with the key shift that drives everything else. The reason the $2 million to retire idea sticks is because it feels clean. It's one number, you can plug it into a spreadsheet and feel like you've made some progress. But retirement doesn't work like a price tag. It works like a paycheck. You're not trying to arrive at a lump sum. You're trying to create a steady after-tax cash flow that can support your life through ups and downs. Here's a quick way to see how the lump sum approach breaks down. Let's say we have two fictional retirees in Ontario, Bill and Joanne, and both have a portfolio worth $2 million. Bill's money is mostly in RRSPs and RRIFs. Joanne's money is mostly in non-registered accounts and a TFSA. Same headline number, very different reality. Bill has to pull out taxable income in order to spend it, and those withdrawals stack on top of other income like CPP and old age security. Joanne can pull from her TFSA, and that withdrawal doesn't show up as taxable income. Any money she takes from her non-registered accounts will be taxed, but at a much lower rate than if it were coming from a RRIF account. So the same $2 million can produce a very different amount of actual spending cash. And the cost of getting this backwards is real. If you aim too low, you might retire and realize you need bigger withdrawals than expected, which can mean more tax drag than you planned for. If you aim too high, you can end up working extra years you may not have needed to. Returns matter, of course, but taxes are the part people tend to underestimate, and they show up every single year like clockwork. If you remember one thing from this piece, it's this: retirement planning starts with the paycheck you need, not the pile of money you hope is enough. Once you stop guessing a lump sum, the real question becomes almost oddly simple. What do you actually want to spend? Not what you spend now while you're saving, paying for kids stuff, and maybe carrying a mortgage. Not what you hope you'll spend if you suddenly become a minimalist. What would feel like a good, realistic life when work is optional? This matters more than people think because retirement spending is rarely a flat line. A lot of people have a more active early phase where travel and hobbies matter more than a quieter middle stretch, and later on, health and support costs can rise again. So the plan that assumes spending drops and stays low forever can look great in a spreadsheet and feel tight in real life. Then, of course, there's inflation. The Bank of Canada still targets 2% inflation as the midpoint of a 1% to 3% range, and 2% sounds tiny until you give it a decade. If retirement is 10 or 15 years away, your normal expenses will not cost what they cost today. Groceries will notice, insurance will notice, property taxes will definitely notice. A common trap is people saying, I'll spend 30% less in retirement and leaving it at that. It's tempting because it shrinks the problem instantly, but unless you can point to a real expense that ends, like a mortgage payment, it's often just wishful math. A better move is to build your after-tax spending target in layers. You have your must-have life, your nice to have life, and your optional stuff that's easy to pause for a year if things aren't going smoothly. That one decision alone makes your plan more resilient because you're not forced into panic selling when life gets a little bit bumpy. Make the number honest, make it flexible, and the rest of the math can get way easier. Now we shrink the problem because you don't have to fund your entire lifestyle from your investments. Canada Pension Plan and Old Age Security don't replace your lifestyle, but they do reduce the gap your savings need to cover, and that changes your retirement number a lot more than people expect. The key is is using realistic inputs, not best case inputs. For CPP in 2026, the maximum retirement pension at age 65 is just over $1,500 a month, but the average amount for new beneficiaries is much lower at just over $800 a month. That's a big spread. So if you automatically assume the maximum, you can end up planning around income you may never actually receive. OAS is similar in the sense that there's a current maximum, but it's not max or nothing. For January to March of 2026, the maximum OAS monthly payment is $742 for ages 65 to 74, and it's $816 for ages 75 and up. So again, use real numbers, not idealized ones. Let's use Diana because she gives us a clean example. Diana is 61, single, doing some part-time consulting, and she wants to net $65,000 a year in retirement. At age 65, she estimates CPP at $12,000 a year, and she uses today's OAS maximum as a planning placeholder, which is about $8,900 a year. Add those two together and you get roughly $20,900 of fairly dependable income. So her after-tax gap is about $44,100. That's the win. Suddenly retirement isn't how do I magically get to a big number, it's how do I fund this one gap year after year in a tax smart way. Benefits don't solve retirement, but they make the math smaller and a bit clearer. Here's where good plans quietly go off the rails. People plan with after-tax spending, but they withdraw pre-tax money. You don't spend gross income, you spend what actually lands in your bank account. If most of your retirement income is coming from RRSPs or RRIFs, those withdrawals are fully taxable and they stack on top of CPP, OAS, maybe part-time work, rental income, whatever else is showing up on your tax return. And remember, this gets measured person by person, not household by household. So that stacking effect is what quietly pushes people into a higher tax bracket without them even realizing. And then of course there's OAS clawback. For the July 2026 to June 2027 payment period, the recovery tax starts once an individual's net income goes above the $93,000 threshold. Once you cross that line, you repay 15 cents of OAS for every dollar you make above it. So this is not just about a bit more tax. In the right situation, it can mean tax plus reduced OAS on top. Let's use the couple in their early 50s example, but this time as a tax drag example, not a clawback example. They want $80,000 after tax as a household lifestyle spending amount. Their estimated guaranteed income at 65 is about $10,000 of CPP each, plus about $8,900 of OAS each. So call it roughly $37,800 combined. That leaves an after-tax gap of about $42,200. And if most of the money filling that gap comes from taxable withdrawals, the amount they need to pull out will be way higher than the spending number they have in their heads. If they use a rough planning assumption that those withdrawals are mostly taxable and their average tax rate on that portion is around 20%, then that $42,200 after tax may require something in the low 50,000s before tax that need to be withdrawn from their accounts. Not because they're doing anything wrong, just because the tax exists. The common mistake is thinking if I need 80, I'll withdraw 80. That's how it felt in your working years when payroll deductions happened automatically and you didn't have to think about it. But in retirement, you are the payroll. The better move is a quick translation step. Take the after-tax gap and convert it into a pre-tax withdrawal estimate based on where your money actually sits. No, one rough tax rate won't be perfect. Tax rules change, your income changes, and account balances change, but even a rough gross up is a huge improvement over guessing. And that's why the same retirement lifestyle can feel much more expensive on paper when most of the money is sitting in taxable accounts. So once you know your pre-tax withdrawal need, you can finally do the part everyone wants to do first, the retirement number. We're going to do it as a range, not a single magic number, because real life isn't a single number. A withdrawal rate is just a percentage of your portfolio you plan to take out each year. People love the 4% rule because it's tidy. The problem is that 4% can be conservative for one person and super aggressive for another, depending on fees, how long retirement might be, and how flexible your spending is, and what happens in the first few years of retirement. So a healthier way to plan is to use a range like 3.5% to 4.5% as a decision tool, not a magic rule. Then you choose where you sit on that range based on your flexibility, your timeline, and how much uncertainty you want to build in. To Diana, her after-tax gap was about $44,100. If she's mainly drawing from RSP or RRIF money, we used a rough 20% average tax assumption, so she might need around $55,000 pre-tax. At a 4% withdrawal rate, that works out to about $1.375 million. At 3.5%, you're closer to about $1.57 million. At 4.5%, you're closer to about 1.2 million. Notice what happened there. We built a decision range. If Diana has $950,000 saved today, she can actually see the gap and decide which lever matters most. Save more, work a bit longer, spend a bit less, or improve the tax efficiency of how the gap gets funded. If your number is higher than you hoped, or you're looking at your current savings and thinking, well, that's not close, you're not alone, and you're not doomed. The worst response is usually the most tempting one, taking way more investment risk because it feels like the fastest way to catch up. The problem is the closer you are to retirement, the more a big loss can force your hand. It can delay retirement, shrink lifestyle, or push you into withdrawals at a bad time. The better approach is picking the levers that actually move the needle based on how much time you have. If you're in your 40s, time and consistency still do a lot of the heavy lifting. If you're in your 50s, account strategy starts to matter more because where you save begins to shape the after-tax outcome. And if you're in your early 60s, sequencing becomes a really big deal. At that point, the question isn't just how much, it's from where and when, because tax spikes can chew up flexibility. And for higher income retirees, OAS clawback can become part of the picture too. Go back to that couple 52 and 54 with $650,000 saved. If their rough target range based on the same gap first math is somewhere around 1.22 million to 1.57 million, then yes, the gap is meaningful. But it's still just math. Sometimes the bigger lever is saving a bit more consistently. Sometimes it's working 1 or 2 years longer, which helps twice because you save longer and draw for fewer years. And sometimes it's improving the order and timing of withdrawals so taxes don't quietly eat more than they need to. And if you're incorporated, this gets even more layered. Your retirement assets may live partly in personal accounts and partly inside the corporation. And how you pull the money out can change both your tax result and your benefit picture. This is one of those places where a plan can look fine on paper and still become quietly expensive if the withdrawal strategy is too casual. Here's the practical way to think about it. Start with what you want to spend after tax each year. Then subtract the income that should show up from CPP, OAS, and any defined benefit pensions. Then ask one more question. If the rest has to come from taxable withdrawals, how much do I need to pull out before tax to make that lifestyle work? If you take one thing from this video, let it be this. Your retirement number gets smaller, clearer, and more controllable when you build it from the gap instead of from a headline savings target. Diana's example becomes more useful the second we stopped asking, what big number do I need to save? And started asking what gap needs to be funded and how tax efficiently can I fund that gap? That is what gives you real choices. So start with after-tax spending, subtract CPP and OAS, then run the gap through taxes and a range of withdrawal rates. Do that and your retirement number stops being a random guess and starts becoming something you can actually steer. And if you're watching this thinking, okay, I get it, but I don't want to be the one stitching all of this together, that's exactly what our team helps with. We work best with people who want a coordinated plan that's implemented properly and kept tight over time, especially when there are multiple accounts, moving parts, or a corporation involved. If that sounds like you, you can book an intro call and we'll see if we're a fit to take the lead. If this video helped, subscribe and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.